And here it is. Among the senses, there is an inner consciousness which consists of intelligent understanding, like a light within the heart. This is the self. A constant presence, this consciousness, which ultimately transcends death, moves freely between the two worlds in sleep, transcending our physical constraints by appearing to contain both the power of thought and movement. At birth, this consciousness is formed within temporal reality. At death, it relinquishes it. This consciousness has two states, that of this world and that of the other world. Yet there is also an intermediate state, the twilight world of sleep. From it, we see the other two, this world in which we live now and the other world that is beyond it. Entering the intermediate or dream state, we see into the other world and encounter both positive and negative messages. When you fall asleep, you carry with you all the matter of your waking experience, but within dream, it is actually your own self which creates and destroys whatever appears. And here the light of your own consciousness is your guide. There are no chariots, no distances, no roads, yet within there appear chariots, distances and roads. Now that actually dates from 2500 BC, those ideas. And you'll find the link into von Franz very, very, very convincing, I think, and inclusive. We've heard a lot about what is this other consciousness that we talk about as daimonic understanding. And in my view, it is explained in dream, and the nature of dream is that it is like something written backwards, upside down. You have to get into its own logic, and then you understand, and then it's perfectly clear. But if you expect it to, I think there is, by intention, two different ways. There's also Ian Gilchrist, who's published a book recently called The Master and His Emissary, which is about our experience of bi-hemispheric nature of perception, says that he thinks that there are two ways of imaging the world, of which people are aware and in differing degrees, and they both give an alternate view of what the nature of the world is. And so, like many things where there are two paradoxes, the essence is in how the paradox is resolved in creating a single image. Now, how I came into all of this is that it's a very strange and almost sentimental journey for me. I was a chorister here at Canterbury, and I first became aware of dreams when I was about 8 or 9, and I used to have nightmares, and I was made to sleep in the sick bay because I disturbed people. I dreamt of snakes and things. And the reality was, I think it was an invasion of shamanic consciousness. It was an eruption of shamanic consciousness within me. And of course, here in the city of Christians, nobody had the slightest idea what it meant or what to do with it. And so that was, that's always been a part of my life. And I've hardly been back here since. And I came down with my neighbour Isabel here. And we arrived sufficiently early to have a chance to walk round the cathedral and visit those places with which I was once so familiar. But the thing is that I became a musician, and I am a musician, but I mean I had a life as a broadcast composer and producer and so forth. And around about the early 80s, I became dissatisfied. I sort of felt I'd done everything, I'd ticked every box I needed to. And I wanted to find a way to move on, and I wanted to find a way to enter a deeper world within myself, musically, creatively, as a composer and so on. And that seemed very, very hard. And I then saw this thing about the film. I'd already begun to study my dreams because I had a strange set of numbers came up in my dreams, and I thought I'd start to keep a record of them just to see if there's any kind of pattern. Anyway, so I did that, and I saw about The Way of the Dream, and these films were made in 1985. They feature Marie-Louise von Franz, who was a close associate of Jung's. She was 30 years younger than him, but she founded the C.G. Jung Institute in Zurich, and she was its first director. And so when this film was made, she was born in 1918, she was sort of, do the maths, practically 70, I suppose. And she also she died from motor neurone disease. She stopped taking her drugs in order to be able to have clarity to make these films. You wouldn't really know that, I think, except that I've read that that was the case. She had a student called Fraser Bower, and he decided her wisdom must be preserved, and that's what these films are. Now, I saw them in 1987 or so, and they were profoundly transformative for me. They really showed me what went on inside and what the archetypal processes of life are and everything. And so then they were unavailable for, until 2009. They completely disappeared from the face of the earth. There was some copyright wrangle, or I don't know what. They suddenly appeared. I googled them, and there they were. That Marion Woodman, who was actually Fraser Bower's sister, put them onto DVD. 1,000 copies were put on sale. They sold out almost immediately, and they were withdrawn from sale. They would never been available since. What the story behind that all is, I don't know. But the thing is, I've given some seminars at this sort of weekend Way of the Dream seminars, which replicated the way in which I experienced it, where people watch the films and then they discuss amongst themselves about them. And these have been very rewarding. And there's discussion about whether we may do one here. Anyway, without more ado, I'll click into the first one, because otherwise we won't have any time to discuss anything.
Who makes the dreams? There is still a naive prejudice among many people that dreams express our own wishes, or our own schemes or plots. But the longer one looks at them, the more one sees that cannot be true. Too many dreams represent what we hate hearing.
I always had this one recurring dream when I was little. Yeah, it's a dream that I get rolled up in a window shade and my head's sticking out one end. It's not funny, my feet are out the other, and then it's falling and falling and falling. And I can't scream, I have no voice. And right as I almost hit the floor, I wake up.
The basis from which dreams originate seems to be rather, let's call it with a vague expression, nature. Nature itself. It's a natural phenomenon. We take dream like being like a tree or a wild pig or something. We cannot say what makes a wild pig. Well, if we believe in God, then we'll say God makes the wild pigs. But about that, it is that unknown power or mysterious force which makes all existence. The best perhaps is to call it, with a vague expression, the Godhead or nature, which in such a vague sense that we don't pin it down to anything special, because we just don't know. The only thing by observing dreams for a long time is that we see it has a superior intelligence in it. Perhaps you have seen that in some of the dreams, the wisdom and the intelligence and the guiding cleverness with which dreams lead us. They show us where we are wrong, they show us where we are unadapted, they warn us from danger, they predict some future events in our life, they hint at the deeper meaning of our life. They convey to us illuminating insights.
I remember the ones that make me most comfortable. I'm sure there's a lot that I have that I block out. If you want to remember a dream, you have to write it down immediately when you wake up. And they'll tell you a lot about how you really feel.
Dreams cannot prevent us from the vicissitudes and illness and sad events of human existence, but they seem to be able to give us a guiding line how to cope with them and how to find a meaning in our life and how to fulfill our own destiny, how to follow our own star, to realize our greater potential of life within us.
Is there an overall pattern which unfolds over a person's lifetime?
In the first half of life, it's directed more towards an outgoing adaptation to earthly material outer life, and in the second half of life, it generally begins to steer the individual more towards withdrawal and to develop a certain wisdom and a certain insight into the background of life. And the last dreams of dying people are a clear preparation for death. Ultimately, we don't know. We don't know where we come from psychologically speaking, and we don't know where we go. We are part of that cosmic mystery which is the existence of nature and all things. We don't know why there are galaxies and stars, we don't know why there is a universe. And we only begin to realize that there are certain master patterns, and it looks as if our psychological inner life is also organized by a master pattern. It's centered somewhere. There is a directing force. It's not a chaotic, random thing or phenomena. Every dream makes an essential connection between our ego consciousness and our inner center, a lasting connection. Everybody who has observed and watched his own dreams over years will have a series of dreams in mind of which he will inwardly say, that dream and what it meant I will never forget. One is forever linked with it, and through that dream one is linked with one's inner center. The dream is always unique and comes always uniquely at the right moment, at a certain moment. And that's the message of the powers of the instinct, of the powers of the collective unconscious, the message which comes that night through at that moment, and is a message which is meant for you.
Earlier you told me a dream of a dying woman.
Well, that was a very simple woman, and she told the nurse in the morning after breakfast, tonight I had a strange dream. I dreamt that there was a candle on the windowsill, and it was slowly burning down, and it began to flicker. And I had a panic, and I thought, my God, now the great darkness is coming, the great darkness is coming. And then suddenly there was a change, and the candle was outside the windowsill, on the outer part of the window, and was big and burning quietly again. Isn't that a strange dream? 4 hours after that dream, she died. The dream seems to tell her, yes, the candle of your light is flickering, it's going out, but it will continue in another medium. Beyond a certain threshold, the window would be an isolating threshold. It is going on in another sphere. That very same life is going on. She was very comforted by the dream without understanding it. And that is a typical dream of a dying person. You have many such dreams. I have seen, for instance, the other day, dreams of a little girl of 7 years old, which were the dreams of a dying person. Now, actually, she had a cancer operation. I didn't know it when I saw the dreams. But she's probably not living more than 2 or 3 years anymore. And she had the dreams of an old, wise personality.
So, that's the first clip, and I put it open to you to discuss what you have experienced there and the message you take, or what values you find.
What happens when people don't remember their dreams?
Okay.
What happens to the energies? What happens to
hang on, it's not supposed to do that. Hang on. Yes, it's correct.
She's very typically, very classically Jungian.
Yes.
Classical Jungian division. First part of your life, the second part of your life. That's how classical Jungian individuation works. During the first part of your life, you develop as a person, and then you kind of start preparing after this threshold for death, very, very slowly, very, very gradually. Post-Jungians think that these days, even a baby can have a midlife crisis, really. So they think you should.
I don't think she's quite saying it in the terms that you represented, actually. She's talking about a tendency of what happens in the first part of life. She was asked to characterise, to make a generalisation. If you saw all of the films, you'd realise she's not making quite such a simplistic statement.
No, it's not a simplistic statement. It's a classical Jungian statement. It's not simplistic in any sense at all. It's just very, very classically Jungian, because she was a very close disciple. So I like this kind of Jungian clarity, if you know what I mean. But since her days, their ideas have changed, in And also dreams, connect the ego consciousness with the self, with the inner center. Again, that's a very classical Jungian idea. Very, very clear, very kind of solid Jungian she was.
Does anybody else have a take on it?
Yes.
My question is back to this yours. Do you think that there is any Jungian disciple who is far beyond the horizon of his world? Yeah? Because Freud, of course, he has thousands of disciples far beyond the horizons, who are against him, who developed his thought. But I think Jung is still a guru who has a sect, and all his disciples are within his domain of understanding things, of explaining things. Even she is considered as the most excellent of his disciples, yes? She is very, very intelligent, and of course, very, very talented woman. But as I read her books, watching through these things, I have an impression that she is not beyond.
Well, no, she wasn't. I mean, it's interesting, I've shown these films, and I had some people who are contemporary Jungian analysts, and they felt that the films should not be shown without a disclaimer that says this is not contemporary Jungian practice.
Who did you show it to?
I don't think it would be proper for me to say who they were, but they were members of an audience, and they were practicing Jungian analysts.
So did they say how Jungian thought had moved on? Or you say that...
Well,
it's a matter of school. You can, these days, you can be a Jungian analyst and practice, Jungian analytical psychology in this vein. That's normal to be a classical Jungian. Or you can, modify Jungian thought. It depends on how you feel about it and what you think
And why would you feel that it needs modifying?
Because he died in 1962, 1963, 64, I don't remember exactly. And, and then postmodernism, this whole kind of shake-up of ideas came about, and people began to see the world differently.
Can I say, I think this is a discussion that can be had. I am not a Jungian, so in a way, I'm not the person to be engaging in this discussion. I think that's something that Jungians should have amongst themselves. I think there's a wider lesson in what's in these films that isn't solely related to the Jungian discipline. So I wouldn't like our conversation to get entirely hung up on that question, which it seems to be at the moment. And I wonder if anybody would just like to come in and say, whether from their personal experience, how that relates to other things that have been discussed here.
Yeah, I had once somebody tell me, because I said to this person, sometimes I act upon my dreams and I don't really know what I'm going to decide or do, but I have a dream, and that dream then gives me a clue and I follow it. And then the person said, very wise person, very knowledgeable person, he said, that is because you have no will. And I've been wondering about this comment ever since, so I didn't really get an answer from watching this either.
I think that's a very strange thing to say. I hear an axe being ground in that remark. Because in a way, what that thing from the I have to say it again, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is actually saying is that the highest state of being, and I'll read you a quote to finish, that the highest state of being is actually a willless will. I mean, where we're aware, we had this discussion in the group that you were involved about Jung's famous saying. Somebody said, "Did he believe?" And he said, "No, I know." I think a lot of people do, after struggle and study at the end of their life, reach a point where they think that actually mere belief is not. So I think and the will enters into that. I think your friend was not helping you with that remark, from my point of view.
I like this idea because she talks about correction. Dreams correct your current attitude, towards life. You may make mistakes because you're
adaptation. I think she uses actually.
That's true. But even if you're not a patient, they tell you not exactly what to do, but how things are from the point of view of the unconscious, which from Jung's point of view was far more objective than your conscious mind. So from his point of view, then conscience doesn't make as many mistakes as your conscious mind. So you have to listen to it.
But she also puts the dreams in a bigger context than that and says we don't know where they come from. And so she's not only putting them as an adaptation and as a part of the conscious mind, and I think that links much more to what's been going on in the rest of the conference. That they are more a gift of the gods, as it were. Yes. They come from the gods. They are, you know, in some sense, have a daimonic intelligence.
Or as I would say, the otherness within us.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Well, listen, but because unfortunately I have to catch a train. Let's crack on, and then we'll see if this.
They are the sources of what we call neuroses, neurotic symptoms. The most general neurotic symptom is restlessness. That isn't yet looked at in modern time, as because everybody is so restless. It isn't looked at to be a neurosis, to be restless, but it is actually. Primitive man or the Hindu or the Chinese criticize the white race very much for being constantly restless. And you can see that those are those energies which, because we are not connected with the dream world, with the unconscious, we have a surplus of bottled up energy which makes us fuss around all the time. Or it can take the form of a kind of all-pervading anxiety.
But what value are dreams in your work as an analyst?
I don't work with anything else. In our way of...
Sorry, I took with.
Conscious, a message which comes that night through at that moment, and is a message which is meant for you.
Earlier you told me a dream of a dying woman.
Oh, sorry, we got back to the first one.
Well, that was a very simple woman, and she told the nurse in the morning...
Hang on, play DVD... No, but what we should do...
Who makes the dreams?
Anybody know anything about these things?
There is still a naive prejudice among many people that dreams are express our own conscious, a message which comes that night through at that moment, and is a message which is meant for you.
Earlier you told me a dream of a dying.
I think somebody's trying to close me to what's going on.
She's controlling it.
Now I see what happens. This is what we should be watching.
That's what you should be watching.
Yes. Good. All right, you can do it. Come on, you can do it. I titled this section "Energy" because I heard an American speak using the word energy.
Think, for instance, of the idea, what is normal? You have an idea of normality and you think the other should become normal. That's interference, that's a power attitude. Perhaps destiny or God or whatever you want to call the greater powers in the world don't want this man to be normal. How do I know that he or she ought to be normal? And on top of it, normal, what I think is normal. My bourgeois ideas of normality, forced upon a poor human being who is destined to be very different.
Dreams show us our unlived life through the figure of the shadow. Psychologically, what is the meaning of the word shadow?
That is simply a name we use for the fact that most people are not fully aware of all their personality traits. We like to imagine ourselves as being intelligent or generous or good-natured or practically gifted and whatnot. And there are other qualities of our conscious personality, inferior qualities, which we know somewhere. I mean, the surroundings tell us about them generally, and in quarrels it comes out. But we tend to push it into the shadow. We don't look at it. And when we think about ourselves, we forget about these qualities. Only our best friends and people we live with, our marital partners, can generally very clearly point out these more inferior traits.
Could you tell me a dream which reveals the creative side of the shadow?
I remember a man who had great gift in writing and who should have written his thesis for the Jung Institute. And he had always dreams that powerful animals pursued him, and I interpreted that his creativity wanted to reach him, but he didn't accept it. He always said it was sexuality. Now actually he had a woman friend and had very satisfactory and lots of sex, and therefore I didn't believe his interpretation. But he didn't want and couldn't write till he dreamt that he was pursued by a bull, and he ran and ran, and the bull was after him, coming closer and closer, and in the last minute he jumped over a fence, and the bull stood still and went onto his hind legs, and he looked back and saw the erected penis of the bull, and it was a ballpoint. So I said, now there you are. After that he wrote an excellent thesis.
Again, hang on, this is not this one. Good, so this intended to be another little pause where you could discuss what had come up there. Does anybody feel inclined to respond to any of that material in relation to what we've been talking about?
Well, some of the duplicated material we got, as you say, we might have been forced to see it twice, whereas this idea of the dream is unique. It comes at a particular time on a particular night, and I think following up that, she had this idea of it is coming from somewhere as a message, which I think, as you said, backs up what we're feeling.
Think, for instance, of the
Drink stain, I was playing that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find how to get back to the oy vey.
Well, don't try.
No, all right, I won't. Sorry, kick on.
But that's all. Really,
yeah.
Just the specific nature, the unique nature of the dream.
That's really interesting, Lindsay, because when she was speaking, she sounded like textbook Jung.
Yeah.
Of, the 50s and 60s. She just sounded like, a complete little analysis of Jungian therapy. And then she tells this dream of one of her clients, and its twist at the end is so completely unique. And I feel this is what the dream actually does. It actually cuts through all that theory, because nothing could replace that bull.
No, she couldn't get through to him.
Yes.
But the dream could, so there was a superior power.
Yes.
That could actually get to him. And then she said with a lovely smile.
Yes. Yes. So it's a strange mixture of the unique and the theory and the form. You need a form in which the unique and the individual can show itself.
I mean, I have had many extraordinaries. I've actually kept a dream diary, which now is almost got up to 2,000 dreams. And I can go back, right to the early dreams. I mean, I can remember dreams going back to 1966 and things. I find them very helpful. And sometimes, if I'm puzzled in a situation, by referring back, I keep them on a database. I can actually, just by typing in that word, I can bring up other instances where that word has occurred. And it's amazing, actually, how infrequently many sort of unique words that you look up. I mean, I have certain recurrent or dreams that manifest themselves recurrently, or certain themes which occur commonly in my dreams, but I won't go into that. But I mean, I have been quite distinctly guided. I mean, the biggest dream that I had myself concerned the fact that at a time that I'd never heard of him, that Sai Baba appeared to me in a dream, who died last week, but those of you who follow these things. And it was around about the time that I saw, or maybe saw just after seeing these films, and the sense of his presence, which, as I say, I knew nothing about it. I wasn't interested in Indian religion at all. And yet that sense was so strong within me that actually empowered me to go through the business of resigning the posts that I had and commit myself to change. And I felt completely sustained during what actually has... Things have really changed over the last couple of years, but I mean, I spent a period of time in the wilderness, which I suppose would amount to almost 18 years or something, and that was incredibly formative. I actually believe it's the only place you can learn. I mean, that is the Nyaka, that is the big forest. That's where you have to go if you want to hear. In a situation like this, you're completely surrounded by voices. You hear everybody's voice in universities, and loads of voices you have to answer to, and all this kind of stuff. But when you're actually in the wilderness and there's nobody else there, there is only the voice that is within you, and that is the voice of otherness. And I think that is what I think anybody who has ever achieved anything in an artistic way has to go into that wilderness to encounter what that otherness is and become integrated with it.
She also, at the beginning of the clip, she also mentions the umbrella, the major Jungian things, what is normal, what is normality. Normality is defined by your culture, by your local culture. So there's no normality as such. What is normal for you is not normal for me. And if you go abroad, they have different kinds of normality again. And then anxiety and modernity, people in the West are anxious because they have this anxious, very nervous lifestyle. They're worn out by this lifestyle. It's too fast-paced. Anxiety, modernity, and normality again. He wrote about it, and his disciples, like her, they developed it in a really deep
But I mean, I think we heard that. So could I just move? There was a gentleman at the back who was going to say something.
Well, your mention of your dream about Sai Baba, it makes me think in my dreams. I think something that I struggle with is when a kind of being or person appears in my dreams, trying to figure out, is my dream trying to tell me about, suppose I dream about my brother. Is the dream trying to tell me about something about my brother that I need to be knowing? Or is the daimon basically scanning my mind, trying to figure out, okay, I'm trying to communicate something about brotherliness to you. Okay, I'll take on the form of your brother. Or if you have famously, I dreamed about the Dalai Lama about a week ago, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of a big deal. But I'm just curious if other people kind of struggle with that of how to interpret it, because there's these 2 or 3 different streams at least that you could use in the whole model for interpreting it. You'll have very different responses depending on whether you're using a more personal approach to my personal psychology, or whether you're using more of there's intelligent beings out there, or discarnate beings like Sai Baba or the Dalai Lama.
Isn't this one of the problems about the way the dream actually gets across the barrier between wakefulness, between sleep and wakefulness, from the unconscious to the conscious? Because it has to get closed. My own experience of deep dreaming is that it's a formless experience, and then that is at some point towards waking, it's clothed in something that I can recognise, in things that are culturally significant. But I suspect, I do suspect, that the origin of that is not.
Yes.
Is not that at all.
Well, in that business I read, that what I thought was so interesting. He talked about chariots and roads. That was simply how they dreamt of things then. Yeah. We would make our own imagery.
There's something else going on a much more subtle level that is then clothed in something that I can recognise that's culturally significant to me. So it's it's the same problem.
But because time is just a little bit pressing, I just want to say one thing to you. Of course, I think that a lot of the times when we dream things, we are dreaming of what is actually a projection, of ourselves. But in this instance, which was a very, very, it was a complete theophany. I won't describe the whole dream, but I was completely awake while asleep. It was really a revelatory dream. And I did end up going to Sai Baba. Actually, I had a commission to do a documentary about my pilgrimage from Radio 4. And the thing, when I got there, I really was a bit horrified by the whole circus. And one of his sort of leading disciples, an American, very wise black American, and I said, I'm having a real difficulty between the Sai Baba in my head and the Sai Baba I'm seeing here. And he said, I'll never doubt the Sai Baba in your head is the real one. And that really helped me. Anyway, as I say, certainly I've got to crack on, and now let's have another wrestle with this beast. Now, hang on. If we do that, just 1 second. Go on, go. Because what I notice when you do that, it brings up a menu, which it doesn't do. Hang on, menu. Here we are, root menu. Thank you. Okay. Go back. Go on. Here we are.
When you use the word God, what do you mean psychologically?
Psychologically, I'm using the words anything which impresses a human being as completely overwhelming, so that the genuine reaction one has is to prostrate oneself to the floor, to venerate it, to fear it. It's what is fascinating, frightening, or positively overwhelming in a sort of blissful rapture. Anything which you can say what sweeps a human being completely from its feet, that is always being called God.
Are you using the word gods in the same way?
In the same way, yes. Only it means that in polytheistic religions they characterize different ways of being overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by terror, then it is, for instance, Shiva the destroyer, or overwhelmed by bliss, then you are overwhelmed rather by Vishnu, or so on. But in all polytheistic religions there are always assurances that really all those many gods are one. And when you have a monotheistic religion, like in Christianity, they are secretly more. For instance, we have Trinity and saints and angels. There's always a secret polytheistic. So monotheism and polytheism always interpenetrate each other. Sometimes the accent is more on the one, and sometimes the accent is more on the many who are one.
Are the gods alive and well in suburbia?
The gods are nowadays everywhere where one doesn't expect them, and mostly in the desert. They are, for instance, in the bottle of alcohol, or in the LSD, or in some other addiction. Or the Wotan, the god of rage, is, for instance, in terrorists. A terrorist, generally, if you analyze him, is just dedicated to an overwhelming rage. And the rage has him, he has not the rage has him. So that is his God. So we have an innumerable amount of gods, but because we don't venerate them and we don't look at them, they are mostly nasty. That's why, for instance, if somebody has his God in a brandy bottle, you have to find for him a relationship to a spiritual God. You have to drive out the negative spirit by a positive spirit.
In Jacob's dream, angels bring in messages from God. Obviously, people back then believed in angels. But what aspect of the psyche do they represent? Are angels still alive today, or do they all die?
Well, I can tell what happened to me and my friend Miss Hannah. We were driving into town, and suddenly she stepped on the brakes so that I flew into the window, and I looked around. There was nothing around. At that moment, a child behind a car made itself loose and ran right in front of our car that we had already stopped. And I said to Miss Hannah, how on earth did you do that? The child wasn't visible when you stopped. It wasn't yet visible at all. And she said, something in me told me, break it once, break it once. I don't know what that was. Now, historical man would have said, an angel told me that. My protecting angel told me that. It is sometimes as if a benevolent presence interferes with what we are doing. Miss Hannah had no idea why she braked. She just felt like a voice in her ear saying, brake, brake, and she braked.
I thought people would find that quite interesting. I'm going to have to push off, and I don't want to intrude on your time, but I just want to read one little thing to conclude, which one was a quote from one of John Francis' books, The Golden Ass of Apuleius. where she says, "There is one comfort which we can take from myth, and that is that nature seems to want to protect its own deepest creative power against everything, and seems also at times to attach to human creativity a value superior to any other activity." And I think that that is an interesting thought. And the last one comes from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which describes the dreaming process, where he says, or the writer says, Yashnavalkya it was, "When like a god or king you experience wholeness, then that is the highest state of being. This is a person's deepest place, beyond desire, free from evil, free from fear. Just as someone making love to their partner is oblivious of everything else, so in this inner embrace of self and soul, humans experience the fullest wisdom of which they're capable. Here, all wishes are fulfilled, for one is preoccupied with the transcendent self alone, and thus, having no material desire, no sorrow follows as a consequence." So that's my word to you on dreaming.
Thank you.